Hello, I'm Tony Horgan and this is the Volca Keys. Today I'm going to talk to you about using the Volca Keys in Poly mode. Poly mode allows you to play up to 3 different notes at the same time. So you can play chords, for example. You can do this with the Volca Keys keyboard. But as you can imagine, that can be a little bit tricky. So you might want to use a larger MIDI controller. I'm using a Korg Monologue, which makes a nice MIDI controller for the Volcas because it's small and it's battery powered or mains powered, so it can go with you, fit into small spaces, and it's got quite big keys for a small keyboard. So for example, so now I'm going to play you some different sounds. I'll show you how to make the sounds. I'll play you some demos of the sounds. I'm going to switch to using Ableton Live on a Mac here, and that's going to send MIDI notes from its own sequences through a USB connection into the MIDI in on the Volca Keys. So I'm going to change that. We'll play some sounds and then we can get a bit more in depth after we've done the demos. Okay. In these sound demos I'm using a reverb effect on the mixer, which will give them a little bit more of a shimmer. Okay, let's take a quick look at those sounds and find out what makes them sound the way they do. The first one we had was a pad sound, which is this sound. The key thing here is the envelope settings, or the EG settings. EG stands for envelope generator. So we have a fairly low attack setting, so the sound doesn't come on straight away, but fairly gradually, but not too gradually, like this. Then we have, I'm going to skip the decay and release for now, we'll come back to that. We have a high sustain setting, so that means the volume will come up and stay at a high volume for as long as the note is sustained. Then we come back to the decay and release settings. That's one knob that controls this part and this part. There are two slopes, up, then there's the decay, and then there's the release. And this controls both the decay and the release. Really, the effect of that is to stop the note from stopping suddenly and let it fade away. That's the sound that you'll get with a longer decay and release setting. Here I've got that at almost halfway. The controls on the VCO column are all at minimum, and I have the LFO at a medium to slow rate, which is affecting the cutoff, the filter cutoff slightly. So as a note is sustained, the filter opens and closes slightly. It's quite subtle. If we increase the cutoff intensity, you would notice the filter opening and closing more. And if I increase the LFO rate, you would notice the filter opening and closing faster. Looks like Pac-Man now, doesn't it? But we just want something fairly gradual and subtle there. So both of those controls are at quite a low setting. Okay, the next sound we're going to have a look at I call Poly Deep Chord. It's quite similar to the pad sound that we had before, but we're using a much shorter envelope. So the sustain setting is at minimum and the attack setting is quite fast, but there is a slight slope on it. So we have a sound that opens and fades away quite quickly like this. So what we can do with this is to change the decay and release. So by changing the decay and the release, we can make the sound shorter, or we can make it sustain for longer. The other thing that we can do is to change the filter cutoff. Changing the filter cutoff is always good fun. That will brighten up the sound and close it down again. And the last sound for now we're going to look at is one I call Poly Pluck. So this sound it's a short sound. It has quite a high filter resonance, which is controlled by the peak knob on the Volca keys. So the peak knob is almost at maximum, but not quite. When you turn the peak up to maximum, you get that kind of squeaky acid kind of sound, which is great, but that's not the kind of sound I'm going for at the moment. So it has a very high resonance, and it has a fairly high decay and release setting, and a sustain setting which I'm going to vary from longer to shorter. And it also has the EG int control at maximum, so that allows the filter to open and close as the note is played. And to add to that effect, I have used the EG attack knob to give it a slight slope at the front of the note to allow it to open at the start of the note, even though I want this sound to be quite percussive, so I'm not going to turn it up very much, otherwise it would open too slowly and it would lose that percussive element. I just want a slight whoop at the start to give it a wow kind of effect. So this is how it sounds, and again we can play with the cut-off and the sustain control and see how that sounds. Okay, that's enough from me for now. Off you go and try some of that for yourself. By the way, do not forget to go and check out my Volca Guide ebooks, which are available for iOS, that's iPhone, iPad, and also for Mac, and also for Android devices via Google Play. Search Volca Expert and they will all pop up and you can find them. You can try them for free, and if you like them, you can buy them. And if you do like them and buy them, please leave a nice review. Thank you. Goodbye.